Oh, thank you, Sophie. Emma,
Yes, I
hi,
hope so.
how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Sorry I didn't understand. It sounded interesting, the
Right?
last part, but I can't really relate to it, but
Because it's local. So what we are trying to do is we went global first. We spoke with Charlie Felgate and Francis Aragal about interesting topics like regenerative leadership, and then about the design for all concepts. And we have our representatives from businesses who taught us how they are implementing some of the changes. And then on the end, in this panel, we've been hearing how Europe is supporting businesses to do things. And then our Secretary of Economy, she talked about the prospects in Macedonia. So now you are here with us. So tell me, where are you calling from?
I'm outside Stockholm, Sweden, by a lake and a conference center outside. I've just been meeting with a group of executives, Swedish executives here.
Executives. What have you been talking about?
The
With
same thing as I will be talking about now, the only thing I talk about, bubble
did they
hopping.
did they relate to what you have to say?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's always difficult to say yourself, but many organizations do have initiatives like bubble hopping or similar methods for bridging.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you can sense that it relates to what they need actually, right?
Mhm. Oh,
Okay.
yeah, absolutely.
Well,
I mean, it's both between different sectors. It can be between business and the public sector and the civil society.
okay.
It can be between countries or markets.
Hmm.
And generations and between different departments. It depends, but there are definitely, and there are many initiatives. I'm sure there are many initiatives amongst your audience as well.
Right. We heard a lot. So Emma, congratulations on your book. You won the Book of the Year. HR Book of the Year. Charlie will immediately correct me. It's people. It's not HR, right? We should
Yeah.
use that word now. So
Mhm.
congratulations for that. But it was dedicated to bubble hopping. This interesting um, I would say a phenomenon because as you said, it's implemented among students and teachers, among businesses and many different stakeholders. I met you through TheoryU and Dr. Sharma, and I'm wondering if was there an inspiration there for the bubble hopping? I know you cooperated with Google guys to do it. So what happened? How it came into being?
Absolutely, with Theory U. Otto, and I think a lot of the things they're doing, the listening, the sensing journeys,
Right.
it's very similar. I'd say this is like a more simplified method
Okay.
that I usually put into a bigger context, but definitely, it started when I lived in Berlin and worked with ULab people in Berlin, Germany.
Beautiful. So how do we do this? How do you usually lead executives, for example, into the bubble hopping uh, narrative? I leave you the floor. Yeah.
Depends. I do it in different contexts. So one, of course, because I'm a business school teacher, so I teach students. That's the easiest part because you can make them do it. So I do it with all students at the business school, both at the bachelor level and the master level.
Hmm.
And a lot of times we talk there about understanding stakeholders
Oh,
and the importance of that. So we do that with all the students. And then I work a lot with executives, and that's mostly in private companies. So we have a big executive education, and they implement it within the companies. And as I said, in different ways. I mean, it could be also between stakeholders, understanding customers, understanding generations is a big thing now. How do you actually keep a younger, that's you are talking about that, a younger generation? How do you understand it? And how do you understand in between, the understanding in between? Uh, but it's also very, I think the main thing now here in Sweden, it's the public sector is doing a lot of bubble hopping right now. Partly because of there are new laws coming out starting in the summer where different parts of the public sector needs to collaborate better. So they all need it. So the police will talk to the social services, or the school will meet with the military, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's like really in between different parts of the public sector. So right now, many municipalities are doing bubble hopping programs by themselves. I'm not really involved. I don't have the time, but that's happening a lot.
Beautiful. One scene stayed with me because you kind of started it with your putting yourself into the bubbles of students. You are a professor at the Stockholm School of Economics, but also on many other things, among others, TV face in Sweden. But what you said once was, when I have a class, I pay attention to those who are the most silent. So you managed to kind of enter into their silence, I believe, using this method. And then maybe that's why you are, for the 2 or 3 times, proclaimed as the best professor by the students, right? Bravo for that as well. Am I right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's also that is such an interesting topic. I'm not going to talk about that, but I think it's interesting with the silent students, or with the silent people at work as well. It doesn't have to be students. And I think sometimes we tend to look so much for extroverts, and there are so many introverts as well. And usually the quality of their relationships might even be better than the extroverts. I'm an extrovert myself, but so sometimes we are not the best for relationships, I say. So I think we all need to do that, pay more attention to those who are silent, because some people who are silent are very productive and very important in our organizations and in classrooms. Some people will turn into something else. Maybe they're just shy and you can help them. Some people are just they don't want to participate in that way, but they do add a lot. So it's diversity again, also when it comes to extroverts and introverts and different personalities. There are so many ways of creating more inclusive organizations, I think, or classrooms.
Tell us about yours. Tell us about bubble hopping. How do you want?
Yeah. You want to see more slides? Have you seen any slides today?
Okay.
Maybe not. Do you want me to show some slides? You decide.
Well, do we? Yes. Yes. You have unanimous yes. Okay.
Okay. I'll show some slides, maybe, if I manage to do it, but I'll try to do it here. See if you can see it. You can, huh? You see some?
Yes, we see it.
Oh, good. Okay. So I thought I'll do it like fast, because I know we're a bit delayed and over time, and people are probably tired. So let me do it really kind of fast. I thought I'll give you a little bit of an introduction. I talked very little bit about the research behind. I'll be happy to share reading lists so that you can read, because there's a lot of interesting studies here. And I'll talk a little bit what it means for leadership. So those 3 things, but I'll try to do it very briefly. And I'll share the slides if you're interested. So just a little bit about bubble hopping. For me, it's a very basic idea. It's really, thinking about the philosopher John Stuart Mill. He said, "He who knows only his own side of the case knows little of that." I think we as human beings have a tendency to often search for people that are like us, which is nice, because we all need our cozy bubbles, the good teams at work. We need to feel that at home, sharing values, viewpoints. But if we want to develop and we really want to get perspectives, this is really about getting perspectives, then we also need to seek out those with different opinions, different lifestyles, different experiences, different beliefs, etc., etc. So I think if you do want to broaden your perspective, you need to step out of your bubble. But the bubbles are very nice, so we need our bubbles too. So it's not about bubble popping, it's about bubble hopping. Bridging between different groups. And as you already said, I wrote a book about it. It started started with Theory U and ULab in Berlin, Germany. And I decided that maybe you can take some research-based skills and try them out on students. I'm sorry if there are students in the audience, it's like a typical teaching thing. You kind of use your students as little lab rats in that sense. I tried it on almost 1,000 people, different research-based skills, and they had to themselves, we did it a little bit different, but at the end, themselves decide bubbles they did not belong to, but they were curious about. And then we trained them in some skills to make it easier to jump. And then they had to do it and come back and talk about it in class. So, for example, we would have students who had a specific religion, and they would jump to another religion, or to somebody who didn't have a religion. It would be political views. Somebody from the left would jump to the right, etc., and on the other way. Some who, for example, were climate activists. They would meet with somebody who was a climate skeptic. Some did crazy things because these are students, so they would jump to criminals and prostitutes and all those things that the marketing department at my university don't want me to mention, but they did that because they're students. So we did that with 1,000 students, and then I tried to kind of make it very simple, come up with those methods, exercises, how you could bring it into organizations and in between organizations and societies. And since then, I still do it with students. By now, I've done it with at least 5,000 students. So I still do it, both bachelor, master students, but also executives, a lot of in our executive education, as I was doing today. But then a lot of work in organizations, in between organizations. Similar method or same methods, exactly the same kind of training, but doing it in an organization instead of in school. So that's really how it came about. Starting at ULab, moving to students, testing lots of ideas, and then today much bigger. So that's bubble hopping. The instructions are very simple. You should meet and connect with someone unlike you, and you decide yourself. It's very important that you set up the boundaries. Perhaps you do not want to meet with somebody, you might have a trauma from something in your life, and of course you shouldn't meet with a person representing that, or somebody who wants to kill you or whatever. Like I personally, I don't like meeting with criminals. I find that super scary. I would not do that. So not everybody has to meet with everyone, but everybody has to meet with somebody with a different perspective. But you decide who yourself. So meet and connect with somebody unlike you, and then you do all those trainings beforehand, and then you bring 3 principles with you. One is that this is, try to be curious, stay open, try to be curious. You have this point of view you might not understand or agree with, but can you still be curious? And always, second principle, that's super important and comes from a lot of research, always look for common ground. Okay, you don't share the views on whatever, climate change, but you both live in the same city, so you share something else. So try to always look for that common ground. And then the third one, really try to create dialogue, understanding. You're not trying to change somebody's mind or even your own. You're just working, trying to understand and make yourself understood. So those are the 3 principles. And I should say, bubble hopping is nothing unique. And I'm sure there are initiatives similar to this. There are many here in Sweden. I know there are many in Europe in general. There are many American ones. There are many, many similar initiatives. It's nothing unique. So, and you don't have to call it bubble hopping. I don't care. The only thing that I think is important is really to meet with people, bridge between groups, and meet with people with different perspectives, both for your own sake, for your organizations, but also for society in general. So in organizations, we usually talk about silos, kind of tearing silos down. So a little bit of the research behind, I'll do it super fast. When I talk about bubbles, it's really like social identities. The groups we all identify with. And I like bubbles. I think bubbles, there's something that's like dynamic with bubbles. We all have many bubbles and they can change and they can merge and become bigger. We can find bubbles that kind of bridge in themselves. And there's something like both playful, but also dynamic and an opportunity to think about bubbles. So that I think that's why I also like to use bubbles instead of social identities or something more academic. And we know from research that they are very important. They do affect us a lot. Our point of views, our values, our behaviors, taste, whatever, smell, abilities. So they do affect us a lot. So it's important to understand both the bubbles you belong to, but also other bubbles. In organizations, sometimes we call it boundary spanning. Amy Edmondson, for example, she at Harvard Business School, she talks about similar things, but she calls it boundary spanning. Many studies, and I find them very hopeful. This one, for example, I show one here, a paper. It's a big study. They looked at American one. They looked at Democrats and Republicans. It was before the election, and they 32,000 people, and they looked at like, is it possible to make people understand each other a little bit better between Democrats and Republicans with some simple interventions? And the good news is that, yes, it really seemed that people with a little bit of nudging, a little bit of interventions did understand each other better. Not at the extreme ends. So, forget about the 20% extremists, but the 80% in the middle can understand each other a little bit better with simple methods. So that's the good news. Because we do, and I think this is where I don't become, like, sometimes I feel like, am I really a business school professor? I can see the use in organizations, of course, but I'm worried. I tend to worry about society. I don't know what's like where you are, but in Sweden, we are seeing more of a toxic polarization, and definitely in the US, where we meet less with people we don't agree with, and we have less, we don't even want to understand. They're just like idiots, and that worries me. So there's a lot of research around that, of course. And for me, I think the higher goal is to create a better society. But in the meantime, the organizations can become better too. So I had a group of executives here all afternoon doing bubble hopping, talking bubble hopping with them. So for example, there was the local grocery stores. We had a few, we have a big grocery store chain. The local grocery stores, for example, they are very important, both as employers, because for many people, that's the first job they get. So how can you actually create a good experience and employ people from different, and so they get to know each other and they get a job, etc. But they're also important in the local communities. So no matter what you do, retail is I think a big important sector, but there are many others, of course. But it's good for the organization, but it's also good for society. So what does that mean? Does that mean as leaders need to shift somehow? Not only about leadership, but perhaps about leadership. Some would say that, yeah, maybe the most important skill is really curiosity these days. Being more as human as you can be, being curious about other things. So this was a Harvard Business School study talking about senior leaders, especially being very much into bubbles, very much in bubbles where they get a lot of confirmation about what they already believe instead of being questioned about their beliefs. So maybe for senior leaders, it's even more important to do that leader shift. And as a leader, if you're running a company, for example, you do have different choices. for a country as well. You know, when we have a lot of change and a lot of anxiety, you know, it might be the economy or climate change or technology or, you know, war. There's a lot of anxiety, of course. And as a leader, you could, as we see sometimes, or we do see it, you could work with dividing people, us and them, or you could actually try to create social capital. And you do that in two ways. One is that you create teams or bubbles, if you want, where there are thick ties between people and you feel safe and secure. That is important. The bubbles are important. But if you want to have social capital and a lot of resilience in a society or in an organization, you also need bridging capital, which is really connecting different groups to each other. So for me, I like this little super simple picture. It's like, as a leader, you know, or as somebody who creates narratives, do we want to divide people, or do we actually want to create social capital? And if we want to create social capital, we do it in two ways. One is by creating strong groups, and secondly is by creating bridges between those groups. Those two things are important for resilience and within organizations. So I think that's a good. I also think that it's, you know, this I find a super interesting study also by Amy Edmondson at Harvard Business School, where they looked at teams with diversity, diverse teams. And so one of the things they saw, and many researchers have seen that, is that diversity makes it can make it both better but also worse. They had diversity in like special, of course, they, you know, it was gender, education, etc., etc. So what they saw was that, you know, you can get really kind of better performance and better well-being as well if you have diversity combined with psychological safety. So if you have diversity and if you really want to use that in a good way, then you also need to create that kind of psychological safety where you can all come up with your perspectives and you understand each other, etc. That's where the real innovation happens. This is looking at innovation too, I should say. Otherwise, diversity could actually go, you know, you might see less performance from having diverse teams. So I find that very interesting. I find like, you know, we do need to work with psychological safety as well within our teams if they're going to be diverse, which I think you know, you also get the highest value, the highest performance if you have diverse teams paired with psychological safety. So, so how do you do that? Well, I work with like super simple methods, many of them, but I could work with, for example, this little simple, super simple one where I just say, well, you know, let's have a meet. If you have a meeting in conversations, could be with your partner as well, actually. Can you balance between asking questions, listening, and sharing yourself? Especially if you have different points of view. We know from research that it's not so good to just come up with facts or say that you are wrong, I'm right. It's much better to share personal stories. That's really how we broaden perspectives. And I think that's like, sometimes I do this at work too. I just draw that little triangle because sometimes we tend to, like I'm doing now, sharing too much, not asking enough questions, not listening enough, or something else, maybe just listening, or maybe just asking questions, whatever, but a little bit of balance. So I shouldn't go on, I think I should actually let you in now instead of just talking about it. But I do think I like this quote from the Persian poet Rumi: out beyond the ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there's a field, and I'll meet you there. That's where bubble hopping takes place, I think.
Beautiful. Thank you. I saw Charlie here writing some.
Let me see. I don't manage to stop sharing now.
Thank you very much, Emma. I saw Charlie writing some notes, so I'm just wondering, what stayed with you? What's that you found interesting in what Emma was doing?
Hi, Emma. I don't know why he picked on me. That was really lovely. really easy to flow with. I've written loads of notes. I'm going to go with this importance that leadership narratives, which often divide, can bring people together.
Yeah.
That's it.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
isn't that important? It's, I mean, I think it's, yeah, you can, I mean, you can just by listening to what you say yourself or listening to, you know, managers in an organization, you can think about it because sometimes it's like, you know, it's very easy to bond by doing the us and them thing, by the division. So could you do differently? That's something I think we all can work with.
Thank you. Thank you.
Could you do it differently? Yeah, thank you. Emma, thank you very much. Any questions? One question, if somebody has. Okay, come on. Let's read that one question, Maya, please. Yeah. And I'll thank you prior to that, and we'll end up there with that question. Thank you very much, Emma, for this inspiring conversation. Yeah, thank you for stopping that.
Thank you, Emma. The question is from our colleague Katarina Manchevska, who is following us from, well, what was the country?
Chisinau?
Where?
Moldavia.
Moldavia. Heartwarming comeback to the concepts of bridging and bonding. What is the most unusual use of bubble hopping you have led? Topics, stakeholders. What is your personal learning from this work?
Wonderful questions. I don't know if it's, I mean, it's like the most unusual. I don't think it's unusual. I think that's more, you know, for example, one thing we've been working with is the green transformation, you know, going over to more green industry and really having stakeholder dialogues between different stakeholders around that industry, native people, tourism, the police, hospitals is not unusual, but I think it's very fruitful. So those kind of like stakeholder dialogues, I'm very fond of myself. I think they're very, 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 very useful. I've heard things like, you know, I had a manager, and it's stayed with me. So she said, you know, we're doing like bubble hopping, and she had somebody in her organization. She couldn't really understand how that person reasoned when it came to money and budgets and things like that people do in businesses. And then she said, well, you know what? At home, I talked to my husband, who was a woman. I talked to my husband about how we approach money. I never do that in my organization. I just realized we never talked about that. And I just took for granted that everybody thinks like me around money. And of course they didn't. You know, as anybody who lived in a relationship knows, not everybody thinks alike when it comes to money. Some like to spend, some like to save, etc., etc. So, and she took that she took that question into her organization, and she came back and said it was fantastic conversations around it, actually. So it could be like those kind of, you know, sounds simple, but it's like opens up for more existential questions. My own most unusual and what I've learned from it. So one thing I did, which was a bit crazy. So I've lived downtown Stockholm for a very long time, which is a very privileged thing to do. And I know that. And then I decided together with my partner that we were actually gonna, because in Sweden you read a lot about, oh, these suburbs that are so dangerous, criminal, it's like people are unemployed and blah, blah, blah. They're super dangerous, no-go zones, kind of, lots of criminality. So we moved there, we left a more privileged area and moved. For 3 years, we lived in one of those areas. And that to me was absolutely fantastic when you talk about bubble hopping, because the everyday life was so different from the media. It was I never locked my door. So this is the places where people talk about, this is the most criminal, it's dangerous, don't go there. Well, you know what? I never locked my door when I lived there, because the community was safe and it was lots of care. So sometimes also doing some personal bubble hops are very, very good for you.
Thank you, Emma. Well, I appreciate what you've done. I'm not moving for now. So good. Thank you very much for your participation. Thank you for waiting for the agenda. And I wish we see you here in Skopje.
Oh, yes, I hope I can come soon.
That will be a bubble for you,
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care. Thank you.